I'm going to leave you with what took me globally is again the quote, when you change the way you look at things, your perspective, the things you look at change. So look at your life from a bird's eye view and then choose to change accordingly. It was a knowing that I said, your prognosis doesn't have to be my diagnosis. And watch, I'm going to walk again. And he looked at me and I went, I don't know where that's coming from. But it was just something within me that had me trusting and believing that, and I knew it was going to be a long.
Hi, Karen. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Mark. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for coming. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. Now, I have to start off by asking that as a transformational, holistic journey guide and catalyst for sassy, classy, and badassy growth, what does peak performance mean to you?
It's really, for me, it means being at the top of your game. It means getting yourself out of your own way and seeing what's possible moving forward in life and not being stuck or stopped in a lot of the old habits that have held you back.
This is easier said than done. We all want to get out our own way, right? Does one go about doing that?
It's first off identifying it, the awareness, and choosing to change. When you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you'll choose something differently. When we stop and pause and see what we're at, I call it the butterfly technique, the stop, change, and shift. When you identify what's not working, and then it's saying, okay, what can I put in or what energy can I use differently that's going to get a better result? Then I shift into something new. But it's identifying it first. Yeah.
How do you go about knowing what to do after you've identified it?
Taken me a lot of time, energy, and money, honestly, to get to where I'm at today and really identify getting myself, because I look at it this way, Mark, I'm on a mission. And if I want to hit a broader audience and get my words and my wisdom out there, I believe I've got to get myself out of my own way. So I do the work. The work works when you work it. And knowledge is just knowledge until it's applied. So I know a lot of people that are big readers and they're big webinar people and master, and they do all these things. They're not applying it. So I choose to apply it because, like I said, I've got a higher why. And this way it keeps me out of my head and keeps me grounded in my heart.
How were you getting in your own way in the past?
Oh, God. I was victimizing myself. I was making myself wrong. I was asking the wrong questions. I thought the world was happening to me rather than for me. And it just kept knocking me down and knocking me down and knocking me down until I finally realized I'm doing this to myself. And when I was pointing the fingers at everybody else, I realized that 3 were coming back at me. And how do I become responsible? Responsible is a compound word. And if you look at, and for me, I'm a wordy. So if you look at the words responsible, it's how you're responding in kind and being able to shift that energy.
Can you give an example of something where you were getting in your own way and then made this shift and perspective change and henceforth changed after what?
There are many of them, but the one that just jumps to mind first and foremost is going through my divorce back in, it was from 2004 to 2007. And I was so in my pity party and oh my God, the sky is falling and I've got 3 children and what am I going to do? And life is changing and on and on. I remember near and dear to my heart is Cliff, who is my paralegal. And he said, Karen, I can sit here all day and listen to you. It's costing you money. It's your money. You could be doing other things with your money. And I paused and he says to me, you have a choice. You're going to go in front of a judge. The judge can decide your future, or you can choose to change it and do something different with your future. And I stopped and I said, that's when I said, I'm my kid's first advocate. What am I teaching them? And more importantly, what am I modeling for them? And that's when I delved into communication courses. And I promised myself in that moment, I would never be out of communication again.
A lot of times we tactically know what to do. But emotionally, we have a difficult time because of the past, because of things that have happened. They're like hooks that like dig into our back and pull us backwards when we're trying to move forward. So if someone's listening to this and they tactically know what to do, they're in a bad relationship, they need to get out. They're in a bad job, they need to get out. They tactically know what to do. How do you go about teaching people how to handle it emotionally, to build up that emotional resilience?
First off, emotional resilience comes from within. Again, I stopped changing shifts, butterfly technique. I stopped. A butterfly has to go through a metamorphosis, a whole change. Like it starts as a cocoon and it's running around life saying, oh, look, there's plenty of leaves to eat. And then all of a sudden life pauses, something happens. It happens. And then all of a sudden it stops and this web comes around it and it goes through a whole chemical change. And then during that chemical change, it struggles. When we go through the struggles, what are we learning from those struggles? What can we learn? So one of the things that I teach from a place of is rather than journaling is huge for me. I'm a reflective junkie in a sense. What's going on? What can I learn from this? And how can I shift it afterwards? So it's huge. So when you look at the struggle of that butterfly, all of a sudden it starts forming into the butterfly within that cocoon and it's struggling and it's just going through its whole change. Now, if somebody comes along and cuts that cocoon open to say, here, let me help you, number one, the butterfly hasn't learned the lesson and it will actually die because it no longer has gotten the wherewithal to spread its wings and learn to fly. So the same thing for humans. Do we want to fly or do we want somebody to sit there? And I like to tell people I'm the wind beneath your wings. I want you to fly. I want you to be successful. And emotionally, if you're pulling yourself down, it's like an anchor. What can you do? What are you choosing to do? It's a decision which creates your peak performance, right? Because it's something you start looking at. We go through life living a habit. And then once we choose to shift the habit, once we're aware of it, then we have the power to choose to change it and do something differently.
Can you share the story of your horseback riding accident in Costa Rica and how it shaped your approach to resiliency and self-advocacy?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I was going along life and life became a whirlwind and I became the master of doing rather than being in my business. And had this great dream of harmony and success, doing my own life and living life full out. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, I'm not getting any younger. And I've been so busy doing, I wanted to pause. So I signed up for a trip with a bunch of strangers down in Costa Rica. And I am no stranger to horses. I have horses here in Sarasota. And I thought riding on the beach is one of my very favorite things to do. Sunset, sunrise, it doesn't matter. I just figured this trip was going to be full of activity and achieve more adventure and all the other stuff. Because I had been burning the candle at both ends. And when I took the trip down there, I had no idea, but in a second, life changed. And it was amazing how resilient I had become. And I didn't realize how resilient I was. I'm in a foreign country. I don't speak Spanish, had major surgery down there, snapped the femur off completely. So I now have a titanium rod. And then more importantly, the doctor who did speak English said to me, Karen, we put you back together, but you also fractured your pelvis and you dislocated some vertebrae. So we don't know what the prognosis is going to be. I couldn't move anything but my big toe, just barely. And I looked at him and without skipping a beat, just coming from that heart space, it was a knowing that I said, your prognosis doesn't have to be my diagnosis. And watch, I'm going to walk again. And he looked at me and I went, I don't know where that's coming from. But it was just something within me that had me trusting and believing that, and I knew it was going to be a long journey back. I sat there for a moment and I realized that I can be in my pity party again and say, woe is me, I'm by myself in a foreign country. Nobody came to see me from that group. I didn't know anybody anyway. No one checked up on me. And it was just me and the Spanish speaking people around me. And I'm in a room and I'm looking out the window. And I remember going within. And for me, it was a mountain. Actually, in Costa Rica, it was a volcano. But for me, it was a mountain. And I kept looking at it and I'm saying, okay, the faith of a mustard seed. If I want to walk again, what do I need to do? And then it was like, instead of looking at the top of the mountain, it was, one little wiggle in front of the other little wiggle until I was able to really look at all my skill steps. And I said, I've been trained in team management. Let's create a team. Then I started getting on the phone and I started asking, how am I going to get home? I had an airline ticket on one of the airlines that said, no, you have to walk onto the plane. And I said, okay, that doesn't have to be my reality. What else is possible? And I started making calls, and one of the airlines says, yeah, we can get you from the wheelchair to the seat. We'll have a little wheelchair and then carry you into your seat. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm in a diaper. I'm like, can't move. And I know I got to put pressure on my hips but I was determined to get home and not be on foreign soil any longer and be amongst loved ones and people where I knew that was going to get me there. And it was amazing creating a team. I made a couple of phone calls and people knew people, and we created a pickup in Miami where I could be flat, and then carried me back to Sarasota, laid out. And it was just pulling in all the resources within as well as without.
You talked about trust. You talked about belief. Was this trust and belief towards your inner strength, or was this faith involved somewhere?
It was both. It was both, because I've always been a woman of faith. I practice what I preach. And in the moment when we're going through it, when I was in my victim mode back when, I didn't see it as readily. But once I let go of the victim and started living my life full out and enjoying it and looking at living in the light. I like to call it living in the light. The victim is living in that dark cave of like doom and gloom. As soon as I was able to shift over to living in the light, it was like when things happen now, I stop and pause. I take that deep breath and I'm like, okay, what's possible? And I'm not alone in this. And even though I was alone in the hospital room, I never for a moment felt that I was alone. And I really found myself going within. I did a lot of journaling then and had a lot of time to think and question. And it just made my faith all the more stronger, and the belief in myself and the ability in myself to step into that role.
When you work with clients now, what are some of the most common barriers people face? I know you talked about victim mindset, but are there other things that you notice is a pattern, and how do you guide them overcome these challenges?
Yeah, one of the biggest, I keep saying women, entrepreneurial women I work with, and men show up as well. I don't send anybody away because I believe that we all have an equal opportunity to step into our own power. And confidence is one of the biggest things that I noticed. The self-confidence. We're a society of givers, and we're taught from an early age that, here, Mark, here's a toy for you, but make sure you share it with your brother or sister. So the message that's being given is, it's mine, but now I have to share. So I've got to give. And I want, as a 2 or 3, 5-year-old, I want to play with my toy. I don't want to share it. There's that thin line of these things that happen in life that create us to create stories around it and beliefs around it. And from a young age, we're taught all these things, and we're mean-making machines. So we make it mean whatever we make it mean. So self-confidence and self-love and self-trust, the limiting beliefs, so would stop us. And then a lot of it is we have the wisdom, right? But we don't have the courage to step into that power and act boldly. When I say step into your boldness, they look at me, what? And a lot of people don't even know what their values are. They'll say to me, what is that? And so I come from that space to create the groundwork. And once we get the groundwork, I like to say I'm the architect of people's lives. My architecture is to have you stand tall and go out and be fruitful and enjoy the fruits of your labor. And what does that look like? You've got to know where you're starting and where you're at before you can do anything. So resilience is it's also being flexible and meeting yourself where you're at and being okay with that and not making yourself bad and wrong and letting go of the stories.
What are some practical tools or strategies you would recommend for someone who's trying to boost their confidence and self-expression?
As a wordsmith, first off, I would probably remind them that Yoda says, no, try, do, right? You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. It becomes a choice. It's a decision we make. And if you take the word decision, you're cutting out the old. You're incising it. You're letting go of. So first, you've got to choose to change. When you change the way you look at things, the way way you look at things change. And that's the phrase that actually, the quote that actually took me globally. When I started taking that quote and shifting it, it was like I started looking at my strengths. I'm now divorced. I was a stay-at-home mom. What am I going to do in my life? So I wrote down, and this is one of the things that I guide others to do, is write down all your strengths. I don't look at my weaknesses, right? I can hire out my weaknesses later. But right now I look at my strengths. What can I build with that? I was doing 6 hours of carpooling. I could be a taxi cab driver or an Uber driver. Yeah, I don't think so. That's not quite for me, right? So you knock that off the list. But then what can I do? I was a mom. I've learned a lot of things being a mom, right? I can, and I also took communication courses. So I can help thwart off arguments. I can help create peace. And you just start narrowing it down. And again, and I have created a journal where it's a lot of reflective questions. And it also asks you, what do you want to do? What are 3 things, just 3 things that you can do? I breathe a lot. I take deep breaths. I pause throughout the day. And it's, I'm grateful for, you see the sun shining in my face right now because it's coming in. I'm grateful for that sunshine coming in on my face, that I'm able to sit here, be here with you now after I could have been coming from that accident and saying, oh, life is over. So instead I'm here and I'm supporting others, and it lifts me because I want to be that light in the world as well. I mirror, like I'll say a lot of affirmations in the mirror, like, you got this, girl. And there was a time when I was victimizing myself. I couldn't even look in the mirror. I wouldn't even look in your face. I'd be looking down and saying, yeah. Now it's, no, I'm bold and I'm out there. But it takes practice. It's like going to the gym. You're working, you're doing your thing right now, and it takes practice and commitment. And what are you committed to? So I really get down to, what's your why? What is your higher vision? What's your higher purpose? So we pull that out. And once you get that, we look at the values, and there's a bunch of different, I'm a mapper. I've been mapping now as a creative problem solver. I've traveled globally doing that. I'm a visual as well. And that's what got me into mapping. So I'll map out as you're talking, as my clients are talking and just free flowing, I'm capturing it. And I see connections that they don't always see. And then I'll come back and say, let's create a plan out of that. And I give them that map, and it's now becomes your personalized, unique roadmap. And self-care is so important, because when you're not taking care of yourself, you're not giving 100% of yourself. You can't, love and hate can't live in the same place at the same time. So you can't love yourself. You can't love others without loving yourself, right? You can't help yourself. And if you're a vision, and if you're spiritual, we're here in the likeness of God's spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it, then it's impossible that God, that's what I call it, right? It's impossible for me to believe that God would have created trash, for lack of it.
Can you explain your 7 pillars of health framework and how it supports that holistic approach towards well-being?
Yes, absolutely. Coming from a nursing background, that was one of my strengths that I had on my list. It was like, what can I build with this? And coming from a background of kids were to be seen, not heard, then going into a hospital situation where a doctor had given me some scripts to send home with the patient. And I looked at them, and I'm always challenging, questioning. And I said, you're sending this patient home, but you're masking the symptoms. You're not getting to the root cause. And they look, do you want a job? Continue doing what I tell you to do. And nurses are to be seen, not heard. Oh, I got the chills on that one. To be seen, not heard. And I went, I'm not finding joy from this anymore. So what can I build with that? How can I create joy in my life now? I started looking at ways and means of getting to the root cause, as within, so without, right? So when you look at a tree, there's the root system underneath, the inner, that's building this beautiful tree. And if you want that tree to flourish and grow, I always look to nature for my wisdom, so to speak. And I started looking that way. I lived on the river for a year, and boy, I learned more about life living on the river and just observing nature than I have going through university and everything else. For me, the 7 pillars became really, first and foremost, my health and being, especially after my accident. So you have health being, you have under health and being is also your financial health. Most people don't think that's part of well-being, but it truly is. You have your environment within, so without. If my environment is messy, I can look around and say, okay, what's going on within me that it's expressing itself externally, right? So I've got that. Relationships, right? We have our family, our immediate family, a relationship with self, first and foremost, our immediate family, and then it starts going out from there. Are you getting rest and relaxation? Are you looking at your environment? Are you playing? Most people forget to play. You grow up as playing with curiosity, and then all of a sudden you grow up and you have to be responsible and you're responding without play. I don't think that's the way life was supposed to be. So I look at it that way. I look at spirituality as one of the pillars for sure. And I think I clumped one of them together in there, but there's 7 of them. And when I look at that, it becomes a web. Right? You can't have one without the other. Or if you do, it's almost like you see people, a lot of coaches will say, oh, here's the pie wheel and fill in. And if your wheel is going to be off, you're never going to be completely balanced. First off, if you look at balance, you can't be balanced because energy is always in motion. So we look for harmony. So is it going to be in perfect harmony all the time? No, there's going to be highs and lows. And so I look from that and in what I like to relate it to music. If I look at the 7 pillars, where in our life am I getting a good rhythm? It's almost like a heart rate, the rhythm of a ventricular or heart rate, right? Or am I in static? And am I stressing consistently? And that's what we want to look at and focus on that to create a more harmonic lifestyle.
Does embracing sassy, classy, and badassy mean? And how can others embody these traits in their lives?
As a result of my accident, I was asked to write a few books, and I actually am up to 7 collaborative international #1 best-selling books. And more importantly, as I said earlier, journaling is key because part of health and being is energy. You asked about energy earlier. Energy gets stuck in our bodies. Every thought you think affects every cell in your body, and every cell in your body is attached to an organ, creating ease or dis-ease. So when I wrote one book called Sassy Class, in a collaborative book, Sassy, Classy, and Badassy. I started looking at that and I'm like, wow, so the course is the confidence. #1, the sassiness comes from confidence. The badassy is basically the wisdom, embracing the wisdom. And the badassy is the boldness, stepping into it boldly with resilience to create the life that you want. Sassy, classy, and badass.
When you look at the current landscape of coaching, what are some gaps that you notice and how are you planning to fill them with your work?
Great question, because it's always changing. And I was up till the wee hours of the morning last night educating myself. And I was on Australian time yesterday. I'm back on US time today. It's learning and educating myself to keep current on what's happening because coaching has become, there's such an influx of coaches now. It's like, I remember Mark, in 2009, right after my divorce, I had gone to what's called CEO Space in Nevada. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was like networking on steroids. And I had just started my business in 2007. And I remember, I'm going to go to this program and I'm going to be like this great coach and I'm just going to shift the world. And I was like this. And I'll never forget Bernie Doorman, God bless him, he's passed on since. But he was the developer of the program, and he had flown into Orlando to meet all the prospective people coming to this program. And he sat me down. We were in a Paneros or something. He sat me down. He goes, and I'm all excited, and I'm like, yeah. And he says, Karen, what's going to make you different than the 10,000 coaches that are going to be at this program? And I went from here to splat on the floor, and I was speechless. And I said, wow, what's going to make me different? It inspired me to start looking at myself differently and stop comparing myself to 10,000 and everybody else coach, because I'm going to be unique. You might not like me. That's okay. I'm not attached to that. My goal is to get you to somebody that you are going to make that shift with. And does it have to be me? No, not everybody's going to love me today. And that's okay. But there are going to be those that are going to be attracted to my energy and say, that's what I want. That's what I'm offering. And what I like to think is unique about me is #1, I give an experience. I want the experiential. I want you to touch it, feel it, and more importantly, embody the work. So this way it makes a lasting change rather than just okay, I learned it, but maybe I'll implement it tomorrow or in the future, or I'll attempt. Yeah, it's not working. Let me go on. Because when I've had a lot of coaches myself, I have a coach now. I actually have 3 coaches now for myself. And I believe in doing the work. I believe in being lifted, because if I am having a low moment, then there's somebody there to support me getting myself back up and going. So it's doing the work and believing in you and having a team that supports us getting through it. And I've paid a lot of money for that. I would have paid as much probably for college education, but more importantly, I'm enjoying and I'm loving what I'm doing now. So
Authenticity is something that is everywhere, just like the number of coaches. Everybody's talking about being authentic. How can someone actually go about achieving true authenticity with themselves when it comes to their transformation?
that one just seems like a no-brainer in a sense, but it's easier said than done. But I remember every journey begins with the first step, and it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but it's really looking at the uncomfortability, the vulnerability. It's becoming aware of where you're at, meeting yourself where you're at, and instead of beating yourself up for not being further along or being too far behind or whatever it is, be here now. Because if you're looking with anxiety to a future, you're worried about a future that doesn't exist yet. You're wasting energy. And if you look at everything in terms of energy, depression is being stuck in the past. You can't change that. When you're here now, being vulnerable is probably the biggest key to authenticity, especially when you're out there as a coach. You want to be known and trusted. I think for you, and this is how you do it. I actually, when I first started, true story, I paid more money than I even had at the time. I was in debt for I can't tell how long. I had gone to a program and I hired Oprah's coach. And I thought, it's good enough for Oprah. It's going to be good enough for me. And she was from California and I live in the East Coast. And she was telling me what to do, how to do it, and what they were doing over there. And I'm like, this just didn't feel right. And I'm like, I don't want to be that kind of coach. I don't want to tell people what to do. I want to teach you to fish so you learn to fish and you know the embodiment, the feeling of it, so you can do it over and over again. Vulnerability and authenticity is being your true self and stop competing with everybody else and putting yourself up there like everybody else. You're not, you're unique. You're unique.
You bring in knowledge from many disciplines: RIM, heart math, IOL, NLP. Can you tell our client audiences a little bit more about what some of these are and how they work together in bringing about the transformation that you bring with your clients?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember creating an intention, right? Because in the beginning was the word. So I declared myself, I was going to be this unstoppable. I forgot the exact words that I had declared back in 2004, I think it was. But I said, I'm going to be love. For me, it always gets back to love. So what does that look like? I started communication well-being. That was my forte back then. And I was like, okay, everything that came into my space and crossed my path aligned with my declaration, my intention. And so I think the first thing I did with communication courses, I did a lot of personal growth and development. I'm a big fan of that. Is when yourself to thine own self be true. When yourself, others, right? So I did that. And then I did heart math. I was introduced to heart math, right place, right time, a conversation on an airplane with somebody. And I went, what's that? That feels good. I want a part of that. And I actually traveled down to South Florida to see it in action. And then I said, I want a piece of that. And I flew out before HeartMath started doing everything online, most of the things these days. And I went out to the Redwood Forest and experienced Doc Childs, who created it, and got to meet him and really get his heart, why he did it. And our heart is a HeartMath, for lack of better, a stress relief program for me is how I utilize it, because your heart is a magnet. And we have a 30-foot, you hear me talk about energy all the time. We have a 30-foot energetic space. And if I come into your space being negative, like attracts like. I don't want negativity in my space. I want to bump into all these other spaces that are going to be positive. You're the sum total of 5 people you hang out with. So that was what drew me to heart math. And again, stress relief, being, right? It always brought me back to being in love. And then I did, and don't kid yourself, a lot of this was for selfish reasons, right? Because I was learning about me. So I think one of the things I did next, I've done so many. Oh boy. I did the RIM, which is generating images in memory, which is trauma release. So when I was able to identify the trauma within me and clear that out, I was like, oh my God, this works. Oh, yeah, I'm a fan of this. So I got my master's in that one. And then I did NLP, which again is communication, right? Without communication, nothing works, is my thought process. I delved into that. And that's when I got involved in Australia and jumping back and forth between time zones online, which is not always easy. And sitting often gets a little challenging, but I make it work because that's my priority. What else? Oh boy. I put on I gave vision board workshops, and I did a vision board myself. And I remember I want to be an international best-selling author. I had no idea what that is. I'm not a writer, but again, journaling. So that became a cathartic expression of emoting. For me, it was writing these books. After I wrote, when you do a collaborative book, you pay your money. It's an exchange of energy. And then you have 7 pages, 250 words to write. And when I was when I was in Costa Rica and had my accident, JB Owens from the Ignite publishing company, she had been following me because I had nothing to do. I was putting it on post and I was emoting it out that way, going, that's so far from me and I can't walk to go there and I have to go to the bathroom and they're not answering the bell. And I was finding humor in that. Humor is a huge one. And she was following my story. And when I got back, she said, Karen, I really want you in Ignite Your Faith book. Would you be open? I went, I got that one down pat. And I knew it was 7 pages, 250 words. I regurgitated 14 pages. And she says to me, Karen, what's it? And I'm like, I just needed to get it out of my body. Again, big fan of journaling, right? So I wasn't attached to the story any longer once I get it out. But then when I stepped back and I started looking at all these books, I'm like, man, I've been through all this experience. This is the framework for sassy, classy, and badassy. You never know where it's going to come from, right? I took a course in writing stories. I took a course in how to speak on stage and took a course on how to podcast. And it's like you learn these skill sets, and then what are you going to do with that? And that's where it becomes exciting for me, because then I feel like I'm living life and I'm contributing at the same time. But I had to learn them for myself first and foremost. So there are other things in there. That's the major.
You're not only a 6-time international best-selling author, you also have a lot of experience and a renowned speaker. For entrepreneurs who are listening to this, who want to get some credibility, either from speaking from stage or being able to write book, what are some tips you would give them so they can get them started with either of them?
It's not about you, but yet it is about you. Okay. So I like to say it's not about me. So when I'm writing these stories, I'm writing in context. Yes, I've been through this. What's the overall arching? What do I want to get out of writing this? Who do I want to serve? I always look from who do I want to serve and who's going to really get the most benefit from this. It's like being a painter. You have a blank canvas, your sheet of paper, whatever on computer, and you're looking at it and what's the message you want to get across? So once I started getting the message that down on paper, then I started breaking it up into small little bites. I left the title for every single one of the books last because I wanted to see what the overarching thing was. And then would this be of interest to anybody else to hear it? Then it became the title of it. So you create an outline, and maybe today I want to work on chapter 7 instead of chapter 1. And you allow yourself to flow, be in the flow. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Don't be attached to it, because when you're attached to it, you're in your head, you're not in your heart. So once I got things out there, what do you do with it? All right. It's not making me millions yet. I started looking for podcasts, and I looked for shows, and I looked for stages, and where can I be seen and heard, and write a book. Because once you have the book, you're now saying you're an expert in XYZ, right? You can sell that book. I self-published my first book, 5 Ways to Create a Ripple, on Amazon. And I got my first royalty check, and it wasn't big, but I went, I believe that givers get. I gave 100% of the proceeds and matched 100% of them back to Operation Smiles organization, which is all about the children getting cleft lips repaired. Because in chapter 1 of that book, I talk about the anatomy of a smile. And I believe a child's smile lights up the world. So that spoke to me. So I give back to that. And you know what? I might not be getting rich from that book, but it gives back, and it's giving back, and it's giving back. I'm about to make an audio version of that book and give it away, because I believe when we give, we get. So that's law of reciprocity. And I live the laws. And there are many laws, and I live that law. And what I will do after this is I'm going to start promoting Mark and saying what an amazing guy he is. Because whether he promotes me or not, I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it because we all rise together. So I do the same thing. I wrote an article that went out to 375 syndications, right, in Business Innovators magazine. And I went and I thanked every single one of those personally, every single one of those publication syndications. And then what I do is I go to my Facebook page and I'm now publicly acknowledging I can't do 375 at once. So I'm chunking it down to groups of 5. And then I'm saying, rather, not just chunking it down, but I have a show myself. And what I do is I'll thank each of 5, publicly acknowledging them. And then I take somebody who's been a former guest on my show and I raise them up again. So now I'm creating, right? I'm not getting anything from that. I'm not looking to get anything of that. It feeds my soul, and I feel like I'm giving, and I get in so many other ways. You never know where it's going to come from. I was just asked to have, because of that, somebody heard my story, right? You never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. And I had somebody listening and watching and say, wow, you're giving to Operation Smiles. We love that story. We want to put your brand on a bag of coffee. I'm like, what? You never know where it's going to come from. So trust in you and do it because it brings you joy. It's feeding your soul and not for any other reason. But it's not about the money will come.
And we live in a world where basically most relationships are transactional, whether it be a relationship between spouses, partners, friends, co-workers, sometimes even with your children.
Right.
The idea is you do this for me and I'll do this for you instead. Someone like you who just does things because it's the right thing to do without expecting things in return because of the way you feel, because of the way you are, because of your belief systems, your morals, and your ethics. Of course, people like you are hard to find. And it's such an honor to have met you, understand your story, and understand what has created his version of Karen Rudolf. So thank you so much for being on my show. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Any last words for our audience members?
I'm going to leave you with what took me globally is, again, the quote, when you change the way you look at things, your perspective, the things you look at change. So look at your life from a bird's eye view, and then choose to change accordingly.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I hope to talk to you soon again.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been an honor.